Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our third PASS meeting of the year. This is an exciting time because this is a joint effort by our district CPAC group as well as our Parent Academy for student success. So putting those groups together, we're able to present some topics that are very appropriate right now. There's a lot of talk in the media as well as in education about these topics. So I think you're in for a treat. We have a few presenters tonight that have a wealth of information to share with you. It's also very appropriate to have this forum because if you are aware, much of what has come about in New Jersey law really stemmed from a grassroots effort from parents, along with some organizations, to pull together legislators to really lobby for these changes in education so that our teachers are well trained and our students are receiving the services that they really are in need of and entitled to. So if you have any questions at the end, we'll have many of you here to answer them, and at any time you can contact me. I'm Sandy Cullis, the Assistant Superintendent, and you can find me on the website, and I'd be glad, as well as Grace Johnson, who is our Director of Special Services. You know her well, and she also can answer any of your questions. So I'm going to hand it over to Grace, and she will take us through the evening.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cullis. It's nice to see all of you here tonight. Thank you for coming. I wanted to just give you a little bit of background about how this evening came about. It actually came about through a lot of collaboration working with the Special Ed Parent Advisory Committee, also known as CPAC. They really brought this idea to me, probably I would say even towards the end of last year and early in this school year, the idea of pairing with Parent Academy for Student Success to address helping struggling learners achieve the standards. So from there, it just kind of spiraled from there, and I've been working with the teachers who are going to be presenting tonight, and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what they're going to be talking to you about and give you a little bit of information about them. But I like to think of this evening as sort of what we strive for here in Denville, which is to really provide a continuum of offerings to support students with a range of needs in the district, and to really unite as a community where we're working with parents and staff and everyone here and everyone in the community to provide these programs. So our first presenter is Dr. Kathy Benedict, and she's a basic skills instructor and mentor program coordinator here. And her topic is supporting student learning, connecting home and school. And she's going to take us through how we can support students achieving the standards in English language arts, math, intervention and referral services process, which is our INRS committee you may or may not be familiar with, but we wanted parents to get more information about what that process is before you might hear about it, or just so you know what it is and have a better understanding of it, and our basic skills program. Dr. Benedict, just a little bit of background from her. She's gone through being a fourth grade general education teacher here in the district, and she also has worked in collaboration with special education teachers in her general ed classroom in the past. So she's got a wealth of experience there. She's also now the basic skills teacher. And she pursued her doctorate in teacher leadership. So now she has her doctorate as well. So she's got a wealth of information. I'm looking forward to hearing her presentation. And our other presenter is Sue Schwartz, who's a Valley View reading specialist, and she's going to provide a dyslexia simulation tonight, which should be really exciting and interesting, a little bit different. You'll get to do some activities, which is a little different for a PASS. So why dyslexia? The reason we chose to go and introduce dyslexia as a focus for this evening is because there's been a lot of new new legislation and in terms of dyslexia, and there is a handout here tonight to give you a little bit of background, but we know you're going to be hearing more about dyslexia, and I'm going to just explain briefly what the new laws are. There's 3 new laws, and what they do is they define dyslexia, they put up new requirements on school districts for professional development, and they now add a new screening requirement for reading disabilities. So these are things you may hear about as parents, so we wanted to give you more information about dyslexia. And so those are our presentations tonight. We hope you enjoyed them, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Benedict now.
Happy New Year. I'm very happy to be here. I was happy to be asked to speak tonight. As you can see, I am a Far Side fan. If you look at the cartoon, it kind of goes along with the Common Core standards also, because they've been kind of in everybody's way for a little bit. Things are getting a whole lot easier now. It's easiest for the children that are the youngest because they're starting off with the new teaching practices that the teachers have been doing professional development for quite some time now. Here we go again, that's what teachers face just about every day. There's always someone that forgot their homework. Just as an aside though, with the Common Core standards, many times it's been the parent who will call or leave an email and it'll say, I couldn't help so-and-so with last night's homework, this is not the way I learned it. So what I'm going to do tonight is just go over some of the shifts in the math as well as the English language arts. I'm going to give you some suggestions for working with someone who might be known as a struggling reader in your house. There's also been a very big push for vocabulary, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, and helping your struggling math student, as well as the IRS process, and I'll talk a little bit about basic skills too. Okay? In any case, while Patrick fixes that, as I was saying, the Common Core standards have influenced and caused a bit of an uproar for parents, students, and educators. Those teaching practices that I often refer to as a veteran teacher as those tried and true practices have been challenged without a doubt. We're asking students not to think along the top of everything, but we're asking students to think more deeply. And with that, we had to change our teaching so that we're teaching with depth. Luckily, Denville has offered the teachers many opportunities for professional development. We have a reading philosophy, which is so much better and so much different than a reading program. I learned, probably you did too, learn through a reading program where you had the basal reader and the whole class read the same story. You were introduced to vocabulary on a Monday, you were tested on a Friday. This is so different and it's so wonderful because the students learn as independently as possible. They're challenged at the same time, but they can also work at their own pace. They understand at their own pace, and they're challenged at their own pace also. They work within small groups, they work within the whole class. The other thing that's been challenged is student learning and understanding. So sometimes you might think, what's the difference between student learning and understanding, well, a student can know that 2 times 3 is 6, but does the same student know why 2 times 3 is 6? So if you think about that for a minute, we're expecting our students to memorize, unfortunately, the multiplication facts. I say unfortunately, but at the same time, they need to know those facts inside and out and very, very quickly. But they also need to realize what that means. It's repeated addition. It's thinking, like I said, with more depth than actually just memorizing the fact that 4 times 6 is 24 and things like that. What we would like them to do is to be able to use repeated addition. So a student will, you know, I have actually copies. Just do that.
Good job, Kathy.
What was that?
Good job. Here,
You never know.
Actually, she's got to do it on a website.
No, it was actually, I emailed it to Grace and I went down. Is it because it's online? Do you want to switch computers and see if that works? Is it online? No, I can't. You know what they say?
Grace, how did you get from wherever onto the computer? With a flash drive or something else?
If I go to my email,
Okay, so I am on the second page, and I don't think the page is, no, it's the second slide, it's the first page, okay? So, figure that out. As I was talking about the fact that there is a difference between learning and understanding, so if you look at the graphic underneath that, it says the most dangerous phrase in the language is "we've always done it this way." And in Denville, we've accepted the challenge. I don't teach just content, and I don't just assess the students the way I did even 5 years ago. In a nutshell, the Common Core has challenged us to teach deeply, to get that understanding before we move on. Okay, if you go to the next page. Shifts in English language arts. As I said before, we do writer's workshop and we do reader's workshop in Denville, thankfully. And it's not a program, as I said before. Students progress at their own levels. They work independently. They work in book clubs. The teacher may have a whole class read aloud, as well as mini lessons, which are structured so that the students together as a whole class will get the lesson, covering whatever the Common Core standard may be. But then they go back and they're working on that standard at their own pace. They're reading at their own level in order to achieve the standard. So you might have a student who maybe is not quite understanding what to do, but the fact that he or she is working and using reading materials at their own level gives them kind of like a leg up in helping to understand that standard. Text complexity, that's been pretty big. It's the challenge of reading. Students are reading a variety of things. If you just look at the novels, the essays, the nonfiction, those are things that I remember reading separately. I read nonfiction when I was growing up in science class. They're reading it in reading. They're connecting what they're reading with social studies topics and with science topics. So they see the full picture. It's not where everything is taught in isolation. And one of the things that we're hearing as we go on from year to year is that there are not as many students saying, "I don't like to read." They're coming into our classrooms reading. They're walking around with books. At Riverview, we have before school reading for the younger students as well as the older kids. The library is filled. You could hear a pin drop. So it's so nice to see and not hear as much of students saying, I don't like reading, and it's the same with writing too. We're not hearing, I don't know what to write. Because of the way they're being taught right now, they're being taught in a way that helps them to grasp whatever the concept or the skill, the standard is that they have to achieve. But they're doing it with their own thinking, they're doing it with their own interests. And once you can hit on their own interests, that's when you've got them. That's when the learning occurs, and sometimes they don't even realize it, and that's the really cool thing. Because you can walk around a classroom, you can hear students talking about what they're reading, you can hear them questioning each other, and it's on the money. And if it's not, the way that it works is that the teacher can just kind of slide in and say, you know, why don't you look at it this way? Or is there another way you can maybe ask that question? So it's more of a one-on-one type of teaching, and we're teaching according to levels. There it is. Okay, citing evidence. This is very, very difficult for students because it means that they have to take the time and they have to go back and look at whatever they're reading. It also means that they have to read carefully. Now, when you think of it, citing evidence is also analyzing what they're reading. They have to grasp the information. They have to gain a deep understanding of it. They learn to make arguments. So they can agree or they don't have to agree, but they have to give substantial reasoning. And when they give substantial reasoning, they're taking that analysis and they're turning it into synthesis. Because it's typically not just one thing that they're analyzing or reading. When you synthesize, you have a bunch of things that you're putting together and you're coming up with a conclusion. So we're very lucky in Denville again that books are purchased continually. We're asking for not just leveled readers now, we're asking for reading materials on different topics so that when we do, let's say 4th grade does the Revolutionary War, we could have a student who's reading at the 8th grade level, and we could have a struggling student who may be reading at the 3rd grade level or 2nd grade level even. We've got books for everyone, and no one knows what level anyone else is on because they're all reading under the same topic. So that's one thing that it's standing behind the standards without a doubt. We have the materials.
Patrick, it's the arrow, right? The arrow.
Okay, so I just wanted to end this slide with one of my favorite sayings. Building knowledge, that's what happens when all of these things come together. And if you look at the last line here, learning to read versus reading to learn, that's really the whole K-8 structure of the reading program. When they're younger, they learn to read. As they get older, yes, they continue to learn to read. More difficult vocabulary, skills and things get more difficult. But then it turns to really, truly reading to learn. And that's something that when they talk about the standards being for career, college and career readiness, that's exactly what we're doing. And we're starting very, very young. Okay, now, the top part of the slide is cut off, but you have it on your paper. So, two things. What are you reading or what is your book about? Those were the two things that I would often hear. I'm the oldest of 4 girls. And when we were reading at night, those are the questions that my parents would ask us. So what I'd like to do tonight is to go through a reading passage with you very quickly and just talk to you a little bit about the way you can change the methods that you're using right now to question your children on what they've read, or if you're reading to them, to question them as you go along. The passage that's being handed out is from my favorite sport, baseball. It's a Mike Lupica book. It's called Heat. It's 5th grade reading level, but the interest, to me, it's really 4th through 8th grade. So when you get that, I'd like to just read part of it. I'll do it pretty quickly, so Speed reading is not the way to go if you're reading to your children, but just to save some time, I'll do it tonight. Okay. Poppy was the first to tell Michael Arroyo he had the arm. Michael thought it was just something a father would say to his son, but he knew there was a look Poppy would get when he said it, as though he were seeing things Michael couldn't, back when it was just the two of them playing catch on that poor excuse of a field behind their apartment building in Pinar del Rio outside of Havana. Back home, what Michael still thought of home, he couldn't help himself. Everybody knew his father as Victor Arroyo, but he was Poppy to Michael and his brother Carlos. Always had been, always would be. You cannot teach somebody to have an arm like yours, Poppy would say, walking out from behind the plate and sticking the ball back inside Michael's glove, like they were having a conference on the mound during a game. It's something you were born with, a gift from the gods, like a singer's voice, or a boxer's left hand, or an artist's brush. This was when Michael was 7 years old, maybe 8, long before they got on the boat that night last year, the one that took them across the water to a place on the Florida map called Big Pine Key. Okay, so now what we're going to do is get away from those two questions, and I'm going to present to you 5 powerful questions. And there they are. What do you think? Why do you think that? How do you know this? Can you tell me more? What questions do you still have? If you look at the questions that I crossed out, what are you reading? A book. What is your book about? Baseball. When we go down to these powerful questions, taking the what do you think question, you might say, what do you think Poppy meant when he said Michael had the arm? That makes the reader go back into the passage and think, I don't know what that means, he had the arm. If you're a baseball player, you might know what that means. If you're not, you're going to have to go back into the passage to look for the answer. If you look at the second question, why do you think that? You might say, why do you think that? A struggling learner might say to you, well, because there's baseballs on the top of the passage. So it's about baseball. It's about baseball. The question, what do you think Poppy meant when he said Michael had the arm? It could be answered that you need a good arm to pitch. Well, then you go on to question 3. How do you know Michael was a pitcher? I actually had to go back and look to see how I knew Michael was a pitcher. And if you look at the 3rd paragraph down, it says, Poppy would say, walking out from behind the plate and sticking the ball back inside Michael's glove. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, if he's behind the plate, if Poppy's behind the plate, that means he must be the catcher. And if he's walking forward, and then it continues on like they were having a conference on the mound during the game, you have to analyze those words, and you come up with, yeah, he must be a pitcher. Now, again, you could have a student who maybe is not into baseball, but the way that Reader's Workshop is presented is in a fashion where the students would be learning from each other. And he or she might say, well, no, go back, look at this. It says mound. I know the pitcher's mound. So when you're questioning your child at home about what they're reading, or if you're reading with them, keep these questions in mind and make it in depth. Don't just make it surface, like what do you think will happen next? It's not such a bad question. But if you use these as a guideline, I think you'll get a little bit more out of they'll get more out of the reading, and you'll get more out of them. Okay, vocabulary. One of my favorite things. When I did my dissertation, the study that I did was actually at Riverview. And it wound up being something that wound up being about vocabulary, and I didn't even realize it. And what happened was, the main thing that boosted the knowledge of students concerning vocabulary was the fact that it became part of the classroom. So what I'm asking you tonight is to have the vocabulary words become part of your home. So the list that I have, and I can give this to you actually to take home later, they're called character traits. So again, referring back to reading, you can see that all of the traits might have something to do with a character, the way the character behaved. So an event in the book, the way that the character caused the event to happen. So if you look at, I don't know if you can see, I think you can see it pretty easily on the handout, the word confident. That's in kindergarten. The word reliable. You can use that for your kindergarten student and say, I know you're reliable, so I really want to make sure that you get this note to your teacher. The more you use the words, the more it becomes a part of their vocabulary. What we found in the classroom is that the more the teachers used the words, the more it became part of their vocabulary. And surprisingly, we didn't expect it, we saw it in their writing. They were using it for homework assignments, they were using words that they learned in class for just regular classroom assignments. So it was amazing to see. So when you think about the spelling list, the way that we learned it, you have your spelling book, you would learn the words during the week, and then you take the test on Friday. Students in our district have vocabulary books. Make the vocabulary part of your home, not just studying for the week, passing the test. I think some grades do one list per 2 weeks. Use the words, use it in everyday vocabulary. And before you know it, you're going to hear your own children saying the words as if it's just part of their vocabulary, not even realizing it. I'll never forget the one time one of my students said to me, I forget what the word was, I used the word whatever, and I didn't even realize that I did it. Like she was like shocked at herself. But it makes them feel good because their vocabulary is increasing. It'll make you feel good to hear the words, and it will, without a doubt, it will increase their knowledge, it will increase their writing, it will increase their ability to read and decode because they'll have a greater vocabulary moving forward. Okay. So here's some examples of things that you might say to your children. Why are you being so argumentative? Now the word argument is in there. Argumentative is a word that they may not be familiar with. But by using a word such as argument, argumentative kind of goes right along with it. They'll put 2 and 2 together and they'll understand. You might also say, try to be more assertive and ask for help when you're confused. That happens a lot. Parents will say, my child came home and had trouble with homework, didn't know what to do. And I'll say, well, why didn't they ask before they left? Do you have any questions? Sometimes kids are timid and they don't. So when you're standing in front of a group of children and you've got 22, can you be 100% sure that the math lesson that you taught is mastered as they walk out the door to practice for homework? No, you cannot. So use the word assertive, ask if you're confused. And then finally, unflappable on the soccer field this afternoon. And they might look at you a little weird if you say that one. But still, the more you use these words, the better understanding they'll have, and they'll start to use them also. Okay, now going to shift a little bit and talk about the struggling learner when it comes to math. That's a copy of the 4th grade math book, one of the lessons. And it's representing numbers, that's the title of the lesson. Now, a struggling learner may see too many words on the page. When you look at that, there are a lot of words on the page, without a doubt. You've got words that are highlighted. You have the words in the place value chart. You have words at the bottom. You've got words in purple. So it could be a lot for a student that really has some issues when it comes to mathematics and being able to look at number concepts and skills in different ways. They can also misunderstand the math vocabulary. They can have difficulty following along. And finally, sometimes they might understand how to fill in the numbers, yet misunderstand the concept. And what I mean by that would be if you look at the place value chart in the middle, and I would say to a student, I want you to put 3,241 into the place value chart. They could just put the numbers right in there without a problem. But do they really understand what 3,000 is? Sometimes I'll say to them, if I took 3,000 out and 3,000 was just floating around in the air, what would it look like? The number 3. And I'll be, no, that's not what it'll look like. It'll look like this. 1, 2, 3. Place value blocks, manipulatives. This is the way to get students to understand, especially the student that may need a little extra time with various skills. A struggling learner may need to see what the vocabulary means through the use of manipulatives. If you look at the far upper right-hand corner, you see words that are highlighted again: standard form, expanded form, word form. If you look at the middle, you may need to chunk the information being presented. If those 3 words are presented at once, not every student is going to leave at the end of the day understanding exactly what you talked about. And then finally, like I said, use manipulatives to demonstrate and to solidify understanding. It's not just about filling out the math workbook. They have to understand what they're doing. I think I need to speed it up, right, Grace? Okay, I did have an activity that I wanted you to participate in, but I'm going to give it to you to take anyway. Struggling learner, actually all students, must utilize activities that build number sense. So if you look at the Family Circus cartoon, wait a minute, why did PJ get 4 sandwiches and I only got 2? I can say to my students, what would you rather have? 1/3 of a candy bar or 1/6 of a candy bar? Well, if it's the first time I'm introducing it, a lot of them are going to say 1/6 because 6 is more than 3. The more we get into it and the more we talk about it, the more I show them exactly what that means, they'll realize, oh, the bigger the number for the denominator, the larger the section. Right, Jackie? The game that you're going to get before you leave, they call them these days number cubes, dice basically. If you buy them at the dollar store, that's the best because they're kind of like erasers, so they will drive you crazy as, you know, if they're playing on a table or something like that. The idea is for them to think about how they can place numbers together in 2 different ways. The first way is to get the sum of 11. So they roll 3 of the number cubes and they manipulate the different cubes to see how they can add and subtract to get the number 11. You could also add a 4th cube to it if you wanted to do that. Another way to do it is with the second sheet, and that would be to get to the number 21. But this time you add in multiplication, so this would be for the older students. So they can add, they can subtract, and they can multiply in a number sentence, write it out right on the paper, and they have to get as close to 21 as they can. Okay, so that's just some fun things. I mean, you can even think about the fact that the game of checkers is logic. Logic is hard to teach. Logic has to be practiced, and it has to be kind of almost like grown in a way. The more they do it, the better they get at it. With the game of checkers, it's not just me jumping and getting kings. It's me thinking, well, if I go here, what is my opponent going to do? If you don't think ahead, you're going to lose. So the more things you can do with logic and with that one-on-one talking with your child, the more beneficial it is to them in the long run, without a doubt. Okay, intervention and referral services. Each of the schools has at least 1 team. I'm not sure how many Valley View has, but I know the elementaries both have 2. There's a K to 2 team, and then there's a 3, 4, and 5 team.
We have 1 team.
What was that?
1 team.
You have 1 team, okay.
70.
The purpose is to come together as a team and design a plan for helping a student to be successful in the Gen Ed classroom. Now, how does this happen? Many times the teacher will approach us first and they'll say, so-and-so is really having a tough time with whatever. It could be anything from understanding something having to do with math. Maybe it's just continual difficulties in math. It could be something having to do with behavior. It could be something having to do with reading, writing, whatever. It doesn't matter. We take all issues and we try to help that student as best we can. The process is that the teacher will complete a student performance inventory. The inventory goes through everything, things that you might notice. Is the student very fidgety? Can he or she sit still through an entire lesson? Are they constantly asking to go to the bathroom? If that happens, that may not necessarily be a student who's fidgety. That might be a student who has a health issue. So when I said before that IRS is for every aspect of the student, that's exactly what I mean. When the team comes together, the meeting is scheduled, it's the parents, it's the classroom teacher, administrator, and then designated staff members. That could be anyone from the nurse to the school counselors, speech therapists, anyone that we feel, reading specialists, anyone that we feel could actually help that child do the very best they can. A plan is put into place. The plan is created when the team is together, the parents are there without a doubt, and we talk about what's going on. The parent might share things that are going on at home, and we come up with different ways that we can help the student. The plan is in place for about 6 weeks, typically. When the 6 weeks are up, we decide, do we need to meet again? If things are going well, we may not meet again. If things are going well, we still may meet again, that's okay. If things are not going so well, we'll meet, and we'll talk about changes that can be made to the plan. So the idea, like I said, is to have the child remain in the gen ed classroom as much as possible, but also keep in mind that if they are deserving of any of the services that we offer in our district, they need to have those services. So the outcome is, okay, the plan is working, that's great. Modifications may slowly be reduced, and that's something that can still be done within the IRS team. That's something that can also be done between the parent and the teacher. Maybe homework was reduced for a while. Maybe things are getting a little bit better, so homework is increased back to the normal amount that students receive. Modifications may stay in place. Things are going very well, so those modifications will stay in place for the remainder of the year, and then next year's teacher will also know about the fact that A, this student was referred to IRS, and B, this student has a plan, so that things can hopefully, starting in September, just continue right along. And sometimes, after we have at least 3 meetings, modifications have been placed in the plan and documented. The student might still be demonstrating some difficulties, and that's when the team will get together again and we'll decide, do we need to refer this child to the child study team? And when that happens, it goes up to the child study team and the student is tested and that process begins. But our goal as an IRS team is to work with the teacher, to work with the parents, and to make sure that we're giving this child who's struggling in whatever area, whatever their needs might be, the best possible scenario for being successful. That's our goal. Some reading interventions. Encourage vocabulary development through the use of flashcards. I know flashcards are old, but I still think they're one of the best inventions ever. You can even do them online these days. Sections of text read aloud to the student. If I have a student in front of me and he or she is struggling reading a passage, I might say to the student, listen to the way I read it, and then you repeat it after me. They'll hear the inflection in my voice, which will help them to then be able to read better independently. High interest, low readability books, high interest books with large fonts. Thank you to Mrs. Williams for suggesting that when Jacqueline was in my class, and now we have a library at Riverview where we're building up that series. It's been wonderful, because sometimes if you take words off of the page, the font is a little bit bigger, the students can read a whole lot more easily. If they open up a book and there's a ton of words, it can get turned off right away, and we don't want that to happen. You could also provide a window. We cut out part of a piece of board or something and have the student just read certain sections. Use repeated reading, teacher to student, student to teacher, student to student, parent to student. And that last one, the student reads every single time. If we go back up to the second one is an important one for the children to actually hear you reading, and then maybe, like I said before, repeating after you. Writing. Provide an outline or format for students to follow to help structure their assignments, provide graphic organizers, provide word banks, allow students to utilize technology as needed. Now, when you look at all of these things, I said before that they are INRS modifications, things that would be put into the plan, but at the same time, it's good teaching. It's means for all students to learn. So some of these things, even though we're talking about putting them in an INRS plan, you might recognize from your own children coming home and working with some kind of a graphic organizer for their writing. Math, talked about before, chunk and check. If possible, model the math problem using manipulatives. Review and reinforce previously taught material. That's something that is very helpful to the students. That's one of the reasons why they have homework. They don't realize that, but that's why. So that whatever is taught in the classroom, they can go home and practice. Provide personal charts with keywords, found word problems. That would be something that the student might have in class as well as keep at home. I'm not going to read the rest because I know I'm short on time here. And you have your handout anyway. Right through to behavior and motivation. Students record their progress on appropriate activities to tap into their desire to do well. They're a part of it also. We've had students that have trouble doing their homework. So we create some kind of a plan where the parents are involved, the teacher is involved, and the student is involved. It's the student's responsibility, but then we support that student, like I said before, through the INRS plan in being as successful as they possibly can. Discuss with student and parent to decide upon a reward. Involve parents in the reward system so that there's also a possibility of reinforcement at home. And create a behavior modification system or a point system to chart students' progress. Last summer, the INRS team at Riverview got together and we began to revise some of the actions that we would, or modifications, that we would put into our INRS plans. We keep it research-based. Without a doubt, we have to stick to that. Flashcards are up there. That's a tried-and-true practice, that's for sure. There could be some research on the use of flashcards. But what we do is we go and we see, okay, has this worked for students in the past? Where has it worked for students? When you think of Denville, you think of our population. The things that are in our INRS plans are probably different than an inner city district, where you have students that are coming to school without breakfast, and you have a whole bunch of other issues, unfortunate issues. So in thinking that we keep to research-based practices, preview bold-faced words with students, practice reading the words. That's something that can be done ahead of time. Use a combination of visual and auditory directions. That's a definite research-based practice, without a doubt. They hear what they have to do, they see what they have to do, and then you cross your fingers that they can do it, and most times they can. And if they can't, they have two supports to rely on, the seeing as well as the hearing. Daily logs, that's a pretty common thing, but it works. There's research saying that if we keep the home and school connected, without a doubt the student is going to find success. We have to be in touch with each other. We have to recognize that all students and every teacher has your children's best interest at heart, without a doubt. The same with you. You have your child's best interest at heart, without a doubt. So it only makes sense that we work together then. And I'm going to end with a picture, what I was studying for my doctorate, I had to do a presentation on change, and I had fourth grade then, and I asked one of my students to draw a picture for me. And I said, it's the word is change. Do whatever you can, because change means moving forward. Change means taking a chance. Change means looking at things differently and trying them out. So he drew this picture for me. He said, Ms. Benedict, I think all teachers would represent that big butterfly in the middle, because they're the ones that give us all the knowledge. The students would be the small butterfly. They're the ones that have to take the knowledge, and of course it didn't say exactly like that, but that was the way I analyzed it, and thinking like, oh my gosh, that's so, heartwarming. But that's the truth. I mean, we have to hover around them a little bit, not too close, but we have to make sure that they're doing the very best that they can. And the more that we think about how we can do that, the more that we work together, the more successful they're going to be. And finally, thank you.
Dr. Benedict knows everything. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Benedict because I know that was very challenging, and I have not nearly as much poise as she does, so hopefully my PowerPoint will work very well. I was very impressed by the way you did that. I'm Sue Schwartz, and I'm going to actually really annoy you all. I ask my students, I always go over every dyslexia simulation that I do with my students who are dyslexic to make sure that I'm covering everything that they need to know. And I asked them, if I ask your parents to sing when they come, are they going to hate me? And pretty much all of them said yes. But being really brave, I'm going to ask you to sing anyway. So if you'll bear with me, we're going to try this. Jess, is it in slideshow? Oh, okay. I can use the clicker, that's what you say. Okay. All right, here we go. Will that make it play? So much for no technical glitches. So, on your screen is a picture, oh there it goes, Rafi. I don't know if you guys remember him, he was huge in the 80s. There's actually a book one of my kids told me today that he has out. I'm sorry, I'm not used to microphones. Okay, you can play it. It's on there. Face the clicker will work? Or just advance the slide. All right. So I'll have to wing it. I can't sing at all, so I'm going to say the words. Does anybody know apples and bananas? Oh, you want me to sing it? Jessica tells me, okay, she's gonna put it on YouTube. Jessica says, once you start singing, no one will have any clue what it is because you cannot carry a tune, which is very true. So she's gonna try to bring it up. But it goes, I wanna eat apples and bananas. I wanna eat apples and bananas. I wanna eat apples and bananas. Is this getting familiar? Yeah. Okay, here we go. All right, we're going back to that. So then the other song that he has is called Down by the Bay. That has a book out. Everybody know that one? You want to sing? Down by the bay. Come on, I can't sing. Where the watermelons grow. Okay, back to my home I will not go, for if I do, my mother will say, did you ever see a moose kissing a goose down by the bay? Did you ever see a whale with a polka dot tail down by the bay? And then my favorite line, did you ever see a guitar pushing a shopping cart down by the bay? Yeah, it's still not gonna come out. Don't worry about it. Okay, so anyway, the reason I introduced those songs is because not only are they really fun for kids, and if you can see the video, go on YouTube, they're great. The kids are having a blast. They are also really important pre-reading skills that your kids are picking up when they watch and sing those songs. because what they're really learning about is something called phonemic awareness. And phonemic awareness is the sense, well, phonemes are the smallest units of sound in a phonetic language like English. And what they're really picking up, by the way, this is my daughter, she's my tech support, as you can tell, I bring her with me wherever I go because I'm helpless with technology. What they're really learning is phonemic awareness, and that is that you can manipulate the sounds in words, you can change them, you can transpose them, you can repeat them and copy them. And by doing that, they're learning things that they're going to need when they read. Rhyming is a great activity for phonemic awareness. He teaches the kids that by transposing and good, I can change moose to goose and get a really funny and silly song. Going back to the guitar and the shopping cart, he gives them a lot of examples of things that you really can't get rhymes for too easily, and he helps them become aware of how rhymes work by the ones that don't work. And then he says, finally, did you ever have a time when you couldn't make a rhyme down by the bay? So if you want to help your kids become great readers when they're 2, 3, 4, and 5 before they ever get to school, a great way is nursery rhymes and wordplay songs. So let's see, I'm gonna try that clicker again and see if I can do any better. Here we go. But what happens when your child doesn't hear the rhymes? What if they can't predict or remember rhymes? You start the rhyme, they've heard it before, they can't predict the word. What about if they don't really get the humor in a song like Apples and Bananas? And worse, if they get confused and frustrated because they're trying to memorize the words because they don't get that there's a pattern. I had a student in my class today going, I don't get it. One of the students was making the predictions and she's like, how do you know that's gonna be bononos? And he kept saying to her, because it was oat. If it's oat, it's gonna be bononos. She didn't get it. Well, when that happens, you've got a red flag that your child is going to have reading problems. It may be a red flag. Your child has a specific learning disability called dyslexia. So dyslexia, I have the whole definition up there, and I think it's in a handout that Mrs. Johnson has as well. That's the definition from the International Dyslexia Association. It's been adopted by the National Institute of Health. It's also been written into the Special Education Code of the state of New Jersey recently with the new dyslexia laws. The key points are this. It is neurological and based, which means it's not your fault. You didn't mess your kid up because you didn't do nursery rhymes with them. The teacher didn't mess them up by not teaching phonics. It is also going to be characterized by difficulties with word recognition, with spelling, and with decoding. It is unexpected in relation to intelligence. It runs the gamut. You can be dyslexic and be very low intelligence. You can be dyslexic and be gifted and talented. And there are many things online about the famous people, so I'm not even going to go into them. They went through artists, actors and actresses, Nobel Prize winning scientists who are dyslexic and really struggle with reading. And it is not improved what I call normally effective classroom instruction, which means it would be effective and it's research-based for most kids, but it's not going to impact your dyslexic child successfully. This is me, I'm Sue Schwartz, I'm a reading specialist, certified Wilson. I served 2 terms on the board of the New Jersey branch of the International Dyslexia Association. I teach Wilson and Valley, which I love. And I just wanted to, I wonder if we can get into this link, show you our website so that this is a great resource for you. It's gonna come up. There we go. And my daughter actually created this website, so a little call out to her, a little shout out to her. And down here you'll see, it's not coming up. Do I need the display switch again? Yeah, I know why I bring her where I go. There's a parent portal on there, so if it doesn't come up, you just go on at home and you'll see the parent portal will come up. Don't worry about it, we should just go on. That's on. There's always glitches with technology. Uh-oh, my clicker's not working. Okay. See, I bring her for a reason. There we go. Thank you. So today we're going to be talking not just about dyslexia, but also about learning, reading struggles in general and how they impact children. And before we do anything else, or actually as we're doing everything else, I'm going to ask my daughter to walk around and she's going to give you a Post-it note. Her name's Barb, do you want to do that? Give everybody a Post-it note, and then we'll have Jessica grab some pencils for you. And all I want you to do is write one sentence that describes you on this Post-it note. Don't put your name, just one sentence that you use to describe yourself. And then we're going to come around and collect them as well, okay? How are we doing? We got back to the slideshow, it's good. All right. What I'm going to ask you to do after that is we are going to, I know Dr. Benedict talked a little bit about text complexity today. What makes reading difficult for dyslexic and struggling learners is actually compounded by our, oh here, just a sentence about yourself, is compounded by text complexity. When we raised the bar with the national standards, we created a reach for all kids because we're asking them to deal with text that is more difficult at a deeper level and with better understanding. But for kids who are already not meeting the standards, we've made a reach. We've made a bigger reach for them. And for some of them, it's a leap of faith for them and their parents to believe that they can actually achieve the hurdle. But we can do it with a partnership, as Dr. Benedict said, between home and school. And the new reading standards revolve a lot around text complexity, and because my simulation has a lot of that, I wanted to talk to you about it. Vocabulary is more advanced, there are more sophisticated concepts, the length of the text are longer, they have figurative language, and then we also have more complicated sentence structure. So if you're not a struggling reader, it's really hard to understand how fearful you can be when you're faced with a difficult text. So in order to really get it, you have to experience it. So I'm giving you a disclaimer. There's nothing in this simulation that I would give to any child between the ages of K to 8. Although all my kids all saw it and loved it. They all wanted to come and watch parents try to do this. They're really, really challenging texts for any adult, okay? I don't really expect you to be successful. That's the point. You're supposed to feel really overwhelmed and stupid when you do it, because I'm trying to give you a sense of what it's like when you're facing a task that's just too hard, okay? So without further ado, I have simulation stations set up around the room. You'll see wherever the folders are. They're numbered only for my benefit. I don't care what order you do them in. They work best if at least 2 people go to a station at a time, because some of them ask you to read aloud to each other or to do something with somebody else. And if you would just mind working your way through. And as you get up to go, there's cookies and water provided by Dr. Cullis there to ease the way, and hopefully it'll be very relaxed for you. Thanks, let's just get started, okay? Oh, thank you for reminding me. My daughter, I can't function without her. In the front of the room on the stage is one more station that you might not have seen. There are pencils at all the stations, so that you need a pencil at.
I read yours, I like it, and I agree.
Hey, Jackie, do me a favor.
It's your job. They're gonna put you to work.
Your job is to go around and to give these out to everyone. Just make sure you all right? This is my interest. Okay, you ready? So what I did this for teachers.
I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and for our presenters, if we could give them another round of applause. Great information tonight. It will be available online if any of your friends were not able to see tonight. All of the presentations are always online, and they can go back and look and see, and maybe contact us about PowerPoints or any other information that you would like. Our next PAS meeting is going to be on the next generation of science standards. So come back the first Wednesday in February. We have an interesting night of science experiments and getting to know what's new about science. And you can bring your kids with you, because we're going to have some fun things for them to do too. So bring them along, they'll get to do some fun science stuff. Parents can learn about the new science standards, the new expectations, and if you have middle schoolers, we'll be talking about our new science programs that we're offering, because we do offer a high school biology course in the middle school. So have a good night, and thank you guys for coming.